Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Write, Write, Write. I'm Mallory Price and will monitor today's session. Thank you for taking time and investing this hour with us and our industry leaders. Also, thank you for the questions many of you submitted when you registered. We put several of these questions out to global proposal practitioners and writers around the world to get their input and insights. Some of them you'll hear from today. Please feel free to submit questions as we go. Time permitting, we'll get to those during or at the end of the webinar. A reminder for APMP members, this webinar applies to your continuing education units for certification. Slides and video will be available for replay on our website by tomorrow. Today, we have 3 practitioners with us, experts in writing and communications. Combined, they have over 50 years experience in writing, team leadership, proposal development, and capture management. Amy McGeady joins us from Texas. Amy is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Services at Shipley. Amy has held many leadership and proposal management positions, owned and managed her own consulting business, and led a nonprofit organization for many years. Paige Frame is president of McKinnon Mulherin, an industry leader in business communication. Paige brings over 15 years of writing experience. On her LinkedIn profile, you'll read, "I connect brilliant communicators with skilled experts to deliver content that explains, encourages, and excites." Brad Douglas is executive vice president of Shipley's Global Services. Brad will moderate today's webinar. So today's agenda will address a few items. First, we'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of writing. Then we'll move on to the blunders of bid and proposal writing. Then we'll move on to various wonders that work. Then we'll move on to writing right and the 4 C's and what those mean and how you can apply that to your proposal writing. Then we'll move on to tools for right writing, and we'll talk about the elephant in the room, which is artificial intelligence. And then we'll wrap up with questions and discussion about those questions. So Brad, I will pass the rest of the session to you.
Okay, well, Mallory, chime in if there's some questions that we should address. Thank you, Mallory, and all of you who are on the panel. We also have Kelson Forsgren, who is with us as a panelist who may join in at certain points in the webinar today. Many of you have heard from Kelson before. He's an amazing practitioner when it comes to proposal writing, project management, proposal management, content management. So we've got a great team today, and thank you for sharing a little time with us. And for, again, so many of those questions, like so many of you do when you register, it really, in fact, helps us shape this. In fact, there are 2 real common points. We schedule these webinars, as you've probably seen, months in advance. We kind of do them 3-4 months in advance and pick the topics based on market input, client input, and so forth. There are 2 real areas that really pushed us to kind of shift what we were originally thinking on this topic to address. And one of those is there seems to be this need in our industries, in our companies, organizations, for some down and dirty basic communication best practices. I think with instant messaging, with texting, email, all of the ways, the channels of communicating, we are starting to lose a grip on really communicating what we're trying to convey. And the same thing's happening on the receiver end, the reader. We're skimming, we're scanning, and we're not really getting the right messages across, and it's causing rework and confusion, misunderstandings. You see this in the media constantly. How many of us, have read a text quickly, or an email quickly, or a Teams chat, or instant message, and we thought it said something, and we responded, and the response was very stupid. It wasn't even responsive to what was originally said. So that whole area helped us shift this a little bit to just some basic communication 101 standards and things we ought to think about. The other one is, as Mallory mentioned, is the elephant room, artificial intelligence. What's that going to do to writing in general, not just bid and proposal writing, but any type of writing? And so we are going to address that toward the back end of this. It wasn't something that we really had at the top of our mind when we first scheduled this, but we are definitely going to address it. Now, we've heard from several who attend webinars that, hey, we don't really know Shipley, we love the webinars, but so really quickly, this is what Shipley is about. We are a professional services firm. We offer a blend of services from training into consulting. That could be on the pursuit, sales, capture management side, proposal development, end-to-end proposal support, business winning, process improvement consulting, and then you see the bottom bullet there, professional development. We offer a whole array of free services available. And then many of you have already registered for our next webinar, but our next one's coming up next month. We're going to talk about capture, really sales and capture, and some of the consultative ideas and thoughts and techniques around how to better engage with our potential customers. So we invite you to join us there if you possibly can, and you can always visit us at our website. So enough about us. Let's get right into what Mallory suggested as the agenda. Why does good writing matter? And let me tell you, it's becoming a lost art. It just not just writing, but basic communication. So I'm going to ask Paige if you'd walk us through why this really matters in business today.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, this is a big one, and we're going to get into some tips on how to write better as we're going through this. But to start here, of why does it even matter? And there are major reasons that when we can communicate both clearly and in a compelling way, that and with our customer in mind, that can turn into higher evaluation scores, which is winning more business. It can, as we're using jargon very carefully and specifically and matching the tone of our clients, we can establish our own credibility while infusing our own personality and showing our personal brand or company brand. And most importantly, as we're getting to these last ones here, clear communication is going to reduce any confusion on the customer side and really help them get to the decision that we want them to show clearly what we're proposing and make it easy for them to make that choice and really show that we're competent in our area and can do the work that we say we're going to do. So it's a lot more than just following grammar rules. It's about crafting a response that's going to make that job of evaluating and picking solutions much easier on your customer.
Great, thanks, Paige. And one of the things we did to prepare for this webinar was we reached out not just to our own global team of global practitioners. Here's where we met in Dubai a few months ago, some of our leadership, but we reached out to a ton of practitioners that are in the proposal writing profession, and they do this professionally. And obviously we can't put all of their responses, but we just ask them for some of the right writing characteristics, that they are seeing. What are people doing right out there when it comes to helping them? Paige, do you want to just walk through a few of these without dwelling too deeply on any of them?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a lot of those same sort of things of, that they're seeing that people aren't spending the time up front to make a plan, but then also not keeping time at the end to revise and edit, that really making sure that we're hitting all those marks of checking our writing, making sure it's correct from the get-go, and then checking it along the way so that when we're finished up, we feel really confident about the thing that we're proposing.
Yeah, and you can all take a look at this, but and these will be common, and it seems so simple. It seems so simple. You see that one at the top. Answer the mail. If we're responding to a requirement or something, answer the mail. Thread your win themes throughout your messaging. Sometimes we think if we build a good theme statement, we put that in our proposal section, then we can kind of then get into the nitty-gritty of the solution. We forget to weave our win theme back into that content. So this one over on the right-hand side of your screen, always be in the receiver mode when getting feedback. In other words, if you're going to ask for peer review and you're going to ask someone to review your writing, you've got to be in that humble receiver mode. Over in the lower left-hand corner, edit, re-edit, and re-edit. I love that. Good writing is often rewriting, especially with this artificial intelligence, especially with content management platforms that some of us are using, where we can draw on answers to questions and past content and things. We've got to be able to take that and maximize it and reshape it. And we're going to talk a lot about that. So Amy, I'm going to call on you now to go to the other side of writing and talk about some of these bad blunders that we're seeing way too often out there in industry. You want to go through some of these for us?
Sure. Well, as people can see from the quote on the slide, bad writing is really costly. And this $400 billion a year figure doesn't really even count the cost of losing deals through bad proposals. So, some of the bad blunders that we see over and over again is first just that writing to impress rather than persuade. Too many words, too much jargon, being too complicated in your explanations of things. And then frankly, just seeing bad writing. So this doesn't mean writing that's inaccurate or wrong, but writing that's confusing or if not compliant, or it's hard to score and evaluate. And all of these things will make you lose credibility, and they cause issues for an evaluator who's trying to score whether or not you are offering the best value for what they're trying to buy.
Fantastic. And some of you in your registration, you ask questions about this very topic. You ask, what are some of the common mistakes people are making? And so Amy, thanks for that. And then like we did with good writing, we pulsed industry about, kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So Amy, would you walk us through the ugliness of the writing?
Sure. Well, the ugliness, man, it's so painful, it's expensive, and it's inefficient, so some of the themes we see in writing that, we categorize as the ugly, it's writing that's just poorly organized, and there's no roadmap. So what we mean is it's unclear where you're going with the information. It's boring, it's confusing, it's painful to even look at. So by that, we mean it's really cluttered. I think when you see a page that's just covered with a ton of text, that's painful to look at. So making sure that we have white space, graphics, using bullets, etc. And then really the ultimate and ugly is being self-centered, just focused on ourselves and what we want to talk about, rather than what does our reader want to know and what do our customers want to buy.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm kind of focused in on that third to last bullet there. Is painful to even look at, and I hope I'm not very often guilty of this, but I think most of us can relate to maybe receiving an email. So that this gets away from kind of bid and proposal writing, but receiving an email from someone and it is a paragraph, a single paragraph of 25 lines. And there's no emphasis technique, there's no break in continuity, and there's no roadmaps. And it just looking at it, it's like, I don't really have time nor interest nor the patience to read through this. Imagine some of the proposals that our customers receive that are like that. They're thick, they're chunky. You can't really at a glance kind of see where this is headed and going. So Amy, thank you. I mean, that's what ugly's all about. And, we usually know it when we see it. And we pulsed our global practitioners on this very topic as well, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And here, Amy, you want to highlight a few of these that we received back from people?
Sure. A couple that I think are just, I have to say, kind of pet peeves of mine, and I'm sure I've done them myself as well. But using big words to sound important, often it really doesn't make it sound like you know what you're talking about. Instead, it just shows you don't know how to explain what you do or what you're trying to sell. I think another of those really long words, as Paige mentioned in the beginning, taking time to edit can be so critical to, avoiding some of these blunders. And then, declaring those kind of, we're so proud or we're so excited. Sometimes you need to do that in your first draft just to kind of get your thinking going. But really, no one wants to read that when evaluating proposals. So I think these are some of the blunders that we see and, our colleagues around the world see regularly.
Yeah, awesome. Kelson, any of this, any one of these or two of these you wanted to call out as pet peeves or things that you see? Let's see, Kelson, you might be on mute.
I also agree with Amy on some of the things that she's talked about and emphasized from this. I was just thinking as well about a recent assignment I had to teach a group of 18-year-olds about some things that that I've been studying and reviewing for many years, and the challenge in making the content understandable or engaging for that audience was a difficult shift for me, because I've been doing this for a lot of years, and so by choosing what is the most important to be able to communicate with that group is required some effort on my part to adjust to that different audience, rather than one that I can geek out with, for example. So that's one of the challenges that we have when we do know something about what we're writing about, to miss the point on the getting to the simplicity and directness that will help the customer understand and to be able to make a good decision. Once we win the project, we can geek out with them later, right? So those are some things that I was thinking as we were looking at this and listening to what Amy talked about. So I'll stop there and pass it back.
Great. Some have called this the curse of knowledge. We are so close to it. We know so much, and we think we're all that. And this curse of knowing all that, we then put that into our communication, assuming that the reader, the audience, the evaluator, the customer knows as much as we know, or has as much passion about us as we do. So awesome points. Thank you for sharing that. So I think the most common question we got upon registration was, how do we deal with this? How do we improve? Do you have some tips for getting better at our writing? And again, I kind of want to broaden everyone's thinking. Bid and proposal writing is kind of the core here, and it's certainly the core of Shipley's business. We do this every day, all day, as we help refine messages and manage content and all of that. But there's a method to the madness, and that's sometimes what many of us or many organizations are lacking, is how do we get better? And what are the key activities or aspects of writing that we should consider. So some of you who have gone through some of our training or been to a few other webinars may have heard us talk about this approach. There is actually an approach to writing, especially if it's more than an email or a short message or something, but especially in a bid and proposal type of writing, this power approach. So Amy, I was just wondering if you'd walk through real quick each of these letters in this mnemonic that spell out power and kind of why they're important.
Sure. This power method, it's proven, it's produced winning results, frankly, across industries that we work in. And it's fairly straightforward. As you can see, power stands for planning, organizing, writing, then examining and revising. And, in the next few slides, we'll go through, what are some of the best practices in each of these areas that can help alleviate some of the pain points that you let us know that you're experiencing and that we've seen, and then produce winning bids.
Great, thank you. Okay, so an approach, a method. Now, back to what helped kind of us shape this webinar a little differently than we had originally thought is there is this at the core of business communication concept that I just want to share or reiterate. I've been with Shipley for a long time. I've worked with all kinds of companies and organizations in helping them market, communicate, propose, write, rewrite. And this is going to sound like 7th grade maybe stuff. But if we could remember this and go back to basics when we're communicating, whether it's proposals, email, or whatever, 3 questions. What do we want the reader or evaluator or receiver of the message, what do we want them to do? What do we want them to know? And what do we want them to feel? Simple, 3 things. I put out, a request for the good, the bad, and the ugly of proposal writing that practitioners see to hundreds of people. But you know what? I failed to specifically, especially in the subject line, ask them for a response, that I wanted data back from them. I gave them a little context and blah, blah, and then buried somewhere in the message was, hey, send me all I had to do is say, I need a response to this by Friday. What do I want them to do? What do I need them to know or want them to know? And how should they feel? Urgency, sympathetic, persuaded, do, know, and feel. Simple, I know. Very simple, but I encourage all of us to be thinking about that fundamental. Now, back to Amy. Amy talked about this power method or approach. So here you see kind of, there's a lot of stuff on here, but here you see kind of the timeline, if you will, left to right of proposal writing, how that should evolve using this power method or approach. You can see, the early on, there's 25% of our time should be spent planning and organizing. If we've got 30 days out, and writing time, then examining and revising. The key here is we're going to do some pre-writing. We're going to do some planning. We're going to do some writing, and we're going to do a lot of rewriting. And those are key activities as we advance a document or a series of documents through the process. So let's walk through each of these 5 letters in this mnemonic. We'll start with plan and organize because teams have to get organized. They have to get organized before writing. Amy, would you walk through some of the planning tips for planning and especially bid and proposal writing?
Sure. These aren't, people don't need to do all of these on every opportunity, but these are some things that we have found are best practices. So one key way to create a plan is to create what we call a proposal playbook. And really, it's about getting all the information about the customer together before you start writing. Think through, who is the customer? What are their hot buttons? Based on those hot buttons, what is our strategy for winning the bid, and what are the themes we need to be carrying throughout our proposal? And then some of the nitty-gritty details of, like, who else do we think is going to bid on this, and putting together a comparison matrix, putting together a solutions document that's really clear what we're proposing, getting together the details of our compliance matrix, our proposal schedule, our outline, pulling together the writer's information, like who they are, how to reach them, but also what information that they need. I have found a style guide, and doing that up front makes it so much easier to get writing in one voice at the end. If you've given some people some guidelines up front on the style in which you write and kind of the do's and don'ts of your company. And then, some details of how to work together. So, where are you sharing files? How do you name files? How are you managing content? People can, go over that in the beginning, but also all of this is a great reference as you work together to kind of keep everyone on track and minimize problems at the end. And then, some of these things, Mallory mentioned artificial intelligence. Some of these things now, like creating compliance matrices, even an outline or a schedule, can be done with technology. And that's great, but we still consider that part of your early planning and your proposal playbook.
Yeah, and then excellent point. And even that lower right-hand box there, the content management, if all of the different language models, machine learning, artificial intelligence, if they're going to be one of those sources of content that we're going to be drawing from, which it's accelerating. I mean, let's acknowledge, it's been around for a long time, artificial intelligence, of course, but man, it is on the fast track, and we are going to be able to draw raw content, and sometimes very good content, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, as part of that content management database, if you will. So yeah, excellent points. I'm going to pause before we go into, the organizing and writing. Mallory, are there any questions that we ought to maybe address at this point as opposed to waiting till the end?
Yeah, actually. We did have one, and it does have to do with editing, but in terms of planning the schedule for the editing. So this question says, as a proposal editor, I lament when schedules do not build in enough time for more than one edit, or even an edit for most of the key documents, or run out of time because the writers are overworked. So do you have any advice about reinforcing the essential nature of editing? Because sometimes, it just doesn't seem sufficiently valued. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think that's a great question. Yeah, that is a really great question, and it's really relevant here at the planning phase. I think setting expectations up front about the need to edit, and kind of like a what's in it for them, making sure that your writers and your subject matter experts know you have this resource in an editor, and that the editor will be key to helping us be successful and write something great. And reinforcing these are the dates that they're going to need to do their first edit, their second edit, and that we can't miss deadlines or they won't have the time to do that, and that they're here to help all of us be successful. So I think that's a critical thing to emphasize as you go over your plan with your team.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, really a great question, and a very important topic.
Could I add to that, Brad?
Yes, please.
One of the other things I think is valuable is not specifically having a set date on the calendar, although that is important to have, maybe have first edits done by this date and second edits done by another date. But I want to involve my editors throughout the process, so there can be some things along the way that they may be able to be reviewing and not waiting until the end until a section is completely done before it can be edited. I think there's value in the team understanding who these editors are by name and meeting them, talking with them at some point along the way, so that they're known to be part of the team, and it helps to more often level out some of those peak editing timelines.
Wow, great point. And many of us now are functioning in an agile work environment, agile as in capital A, right? And so these edits, these sync ups, these reviews need to be completely iterative, ongoing, as needed, and kind of continuous. It's not some linear lock. And Kelson, you explained this perfectly. It's not this linear lockstep, date-driven process. Editing, reworking, troubleshooting, that all should be part of these sync ups and huddles and ongoing efforts. Great point. Thank you. All right, let's go to the O in this mnemonic, organize. Amy, a couple tips here on organizing our writing.
Yeah, it's really important in the proposal world that we organize as we're instructed. So, we've all experienced sometimes where that doesn't seem natural to us, or it's not how, given our own, given our own choices, we might have organized the information. But by organizing as instructed and mirroring the bid request, it makes our proposal so much easier to evaluate, which is what we're trying to accomplish. And then we need to be organizing around those customer hot button issues. So, when we say a hot button, we really mean the issue, the problem, the objective, accompanied with the motivation to improve or change. So just really putting ourselves in that place of the reader and presenting the information in the way that they want to receive it.
And yeah, that's so important. And I think, and we define hot buttons there in case that's a new term to some of you. Thanks, Amy. And moving on to the writing, which is kind of the core of our focus. The reason though we wanted to spend a little time on planning and organizing is because if we don't do it, our writing can become a mess, and the process can become a mess. And it's the old Covey, sharpen your saw. You've got to spend some time planning and organizing before you start fingers to the keyboard. So to make it easy for evaluators, we're going to try to write and be clear, concise, correct, and compelling in everything we do. Now, a page, you personally and your company, you are exceptional at writing and technical writing, complex writing, but yet making sure it is to the point, like Mallory read in your LinkedIn profile. Would you just share quickly, this is hard for some people to grasp, and this goes to some of your questions when you registered, is how can we work with our SMEs, our subject matter experts and technical people, to help them with their writing to be? So would you just share, Paige, what's the difference between traditional legacy technical writing and proposal or bid writing?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of times, like you said, we'll do both types of writing. So it's not something that a writer only knows this style or this other style, but it is kind of a switch that you have to turn that switch on or off depending on what type of document you're writing, and you're following a lot of the same grammar rules, but your tone and style and kind of motivation are different in the two different types of writing. Because in tech writing, you're starting with the details. You're saying, this is exactly how this machine, system, solution, product works. You're documenting how things function or what you need to know to work with them. And you should have your main points of why we're using that solution, or why it is the best solution. But generally, if someone's looking at documentation, they're sold and they're using it. They're already convinced on it. So proposal writing flips that you really want to, we are trying to sell them on it, be compelling. So we're going to start with our main point. And then once we are convincing them of that, then we can go into those details to show our expertise and make sure that we're being confident in that, but we want to make sure that we are starting with our main point. And as we're either ourselves technical writers and prefer to jump right into the details, or working with SMEs who might feel that way, the biggest tip I have is to just not let that stifle your first draft. That if that's the way that you work best to write out all the details, or if that's what your SME needs to do, get it out, write it all out, and then looking at all of that information, start thinking about what about that makes it cool or interesting or important, and that helps you gather what your main point is. And as you already covered, Brad, the pre-writing, writing, rewriting, we've got time to rewrite it and put that main point up front with the details coming later to support it.
Excellent, great, thank you. And along with that, I'm going to ask Amy if she would, and this is kind of a webinar topic in and of itself, so we're just going to glance over this quickly. You can come back to it. It's all going to be posted on the site. But as some of you who have worked with Shipley before, as we help our clients with proposals, one of our main focus areas is helping our proposals be focused on the customer. And so we here try to articulate 10 ways to try to make sure our writing is most customer focused. Would you just bounce through these for us, Amy?
Sure, and I could talk about all of these for a long period of time, but maybe I'll just point to a few that I think are kind of my favorites on the list. Point number 3, mentioning and addressing the customer's buying objective. Just being really clear that you understand them, you know what they're trying to accomplish. You're not telling them about other things or just how great you are, but you're focused on them. Point number 5, back to those customer hot buttons. It's not just addressing the hot buttons, but knowing sort of the prioritized order of them and addressing them in that order. So if you know your customer is really focused on, one specific thing, like they've had a terrible experience in the past when they've transitioned vendors, and that's just a really big pain point of theirs, well, make sure that that's what you're talking about, and that you demonstrate you understand that that's at the forefront of their mind. I think number 6, be focused on those benefits before the features. And, as Paige mentions, that might be something that you do in editing, but just to make sure that in the end, that's a customer focused writing tip. And then I think the last one I'll touch on right now is just making sure that your value proposition is crystal clear to the customer. They don't have to hunt for it. They don't have to guess what it is. It's apparent to them.
Excellent. Yeah, and great points. And this is something I'd encourage any of us on this webinar to share across our teams. What do we mean? Should our writing be customer focused? Well, here's some really good tips and guidelines. We should be focusing on our strengths also, as those strengths align with what matters to the customer. Back to Amy's point, their objective. It's one thing to have a great strength in our solution, but unless that aligns with their objective, there might be kind of a disconnect. So these are great points to come back. Thanks, Amy. And then when we get into the E and the R of power, we mentioned these 4 C's early on, I think, in the agenda. Would you just touch on these also, Paige, please?
Yeah, definitely. I love using these 4 C's to help your reviewers in the reviewing process. So we're talking about them examining your proposal, and a lot of times if we send out a proposal for a review, depending on who's reviewing it, they may be tempted to focus on grammar and fixing mistakes. And we have so many tools to fix grammar. And I, of course, feel strongly about a human proofreader at the end, but also it's not the only thing we should be looking for. And so if you can give your reviewers these guidelines of these 4 C's of things to look for, can help you get some really good feedback for you to strengthen your response. And you can either give all 4 to a single reviewer, or if you have the luxury of a few different reviewers, having someone who's really sharp on details, only looking at if it's correct. Check all the facts and figures, make sure everything we're saying is accurate and true. Having your editor make sure that it's concise and succinct and to the point. Having other people look and really see, is it compelling? Does it make me want to act? And using these as guidelines that are easy to remember help guide your reviewers to give you really good feedback that you can use as you get into revising.
And then along with that, several asked about more, again, about editing and revising. And Mallory, it sounds like we've had a few questions also. So just some points here. Paige, you want to just touch on these?
Yeah, the things I like about the items here on revising, they focus on the parts where our readers are most likely to look. And we're all kind of lazy readers, even those of us who do read something from front to back. Our initial glance is going to go to certain places. So as your readers are more likely to look at lists with white space around them and graphics and headings, put your main messages in those areas. Make it easier for them to get your win theme right from the areas that they're most likely to look. And of course, this is a great time as we're revising to use those simple, concise words, things that are really easy to understand, that we're not rereading and trying to decipher what solution someone's actually trying to propose, and showing who the actor is and using active voice, being very clear about who's going to do what. Avoiding technical jargon and cliches, which can kind of sometimes just add word count to your proposal, which you don't necessarily want. And overall, being consistent. So I know there were some questions about what tense to use, or whether to be kind of a formal or informal tone. A lot of that depends on your audience and who you're writing to, who the evaluators are. And the most important part is to figure that out in the planning stage and be consistent throughout. Make sure that you've got that same plan, you're using the same tense, you're having that same tone throughout, and using this time to, when you're revising, to find that one voice and make it sound like it's written by one person, even if you have multiple writers contributing.
Excellent, thank you. And then the last thing we'll touch on here before we move on to the next section is graphics. We really shouldn't separate graphics from our writing. They should be complementary in how we approach graphics. And so just a couple of tips here. And again, this is kind of a topic in and of itself. So don't neglect this. Think of graphics earlier as opposed to later. Many times a graphic can actually compel our writing in our planning. Amy, any little tips on graphics and writing?
Yeah, I think it's just really important that we're not treating graphics as decorations, that we remember that graphics are a key piece of our storytelling, and that simpler is better. So, graphics that are self-explanatory, easy to interpret. I think one of the biggest things is just having a single idea versus thinking you're going to tell every aspect of your company's story in one picture. And then using captions to really clarify your takeaway. One thing I learned early in my proposal career from someone that had sat on source selection boards is that, when an evaluator is trying to make the case to choose your organization, it can be so helpful if you already have a graphic with a caption in your proposal that they can just copy and paste into their presentation deck that says, this is why I want to select this company. Once I heard that, that really helped me know, oh, this is as important, sometimes more important than all the writing and all the words I'm putting in the proposal, is if I can tell that story in a single image or picture, and I can come up with that one statement that explains what's important, how helpful that is to the evaluator.
Great, thank you. Okay, at this point, just want to let everyone know, in case you didn't see it, in your little navigation box, there is a handout that you're welcome to, we invite you to download. Some of you are familiar with what we call the 7 characteristics of effective proposals. And that's what the handout is. It's an overview of those 7 characteristics, one of which is writing, the quality of our writing. And so feel free to download that, save it, use it, and share it with others. The last thing we want to talk about, Mallory, thanks for building this into the agenda, is this artificial intelligence passion or awareness that seems to be all over the place. I want to put in a disclaimer here that we at Shipley would never claim to be artificial intelligence or any machine learning language model experts. We're learning like you are. We're seeing it being applied and used in different ways and in different patterns in different organizations. We're seeing some that are embracing, some that are shying away, and the whole gamut. So with that in mind, we just wanted to share what we think are a couple of pros and cons that we might be thinking about when it comes to writing and AI, language modeling. A couple of pros and possible benefits here. It might be quick and easy. It's going to give you maybe broad access. You know, ChatGPT or Bard, any of the platforms will provide a base of often really good content. You know, source to brainstorm ideas, quick first drafts, industry terminology that we maybe ought to know about. It's becoming a legitimate source of customer and competitor research. It's one more source that we can go to. And AI and these platforms actually are multi-sourced. You know, they're not a single source of data. They're just not pulling from the internet. A lot of it, yes, but other sources. So those are some of the pros and possible benefits, some cons and cautions. Be careful, you know, so what it puts back to us that when we ask for something, maybe dated, could be incorrect. We ask about Shipley and an overview of Shipley, and some guy named Craig was apparently the founder of Shipley Associates, and I don't know Craig, but anyway, so just be careful. We've got to verify everything. There may be some bias built into some of the content. Not always, it's not going to give you some of the context. It's certainly not going to give you the customer focus insight that we all need in our proposals. It could be an excuse. It could become an accountability problem within organizations if we lean on it in the wrong ways. In other words, you know, oh, that didn't come from me. You know, that came from the cloud or wherever. That could lead to overzealous, reckless, inadvertent misuse and mistakes if we don't put guidelines in place. This is one thing we say is be up on this, be aware of it. You might create tiger teams to really start to figure out what's right and what's wrong in your organization. Let's acknowledge it could conflict with reality and the truth. Just in my simple search of give me an overview of Shipley Associates. Most of it was good and accurate, but about 15% was completely bogus. I don't know where it came from, and I don't know where that information was, but there's not a guy named Craig that started Shipley back in the 1950s. So some pros, benefits, cons, cautions, and I know we could spend hours and days probably on this, but that's not the point of this webinar. We're going to talk about it as it relates to writing. So if some of you have not played with this, or some of you are being discouraged from looking into it or whatever, let me just share a couple of simple, quick examples. So I went into ChatGPT-4 and I said, what are the benefits of owning an umbrella? Harmless. This is what came back. This is word for word. I didn't do anything to this. The primary benefit, you can read there, rain or sun, and then shielding yourself. Then the 3 bullet points. Useful in high winds, okay. Fashionable accessories, cool. If it's a fashion statement, great. Overall, umbrellas are practical. There you go. All right. Without drilling any deeper or asking it to do any kind of thought modeling or anything else, that's what I got. What's missing? Well, of course, Amy talked about customer-focused writing. If we were to use this as a source of content for some kind of response or proposal or bid or whatever, so what? You know, so what? That maybe I don't want it for the rain or the sun. You know, maybe I need the umbrella for some other purpose. I need it to be sturdy. That's what I need. I need it to be rugged and tough and sturdy. So then I might focus on this high winds, you know, but we've got to know the customer. So we've got to use this kind of content from all these different sources to make sure we are laser focused on what matters to the customer. We've got to answer the so what. One more example real quick. Why should I consider buying an electric car? Well, here it is, word for word, right from ChatGPT. There you go. I didn't put those numbers in, they did. It. You know, the bot, it put it in there. So there you have 5 reasons why someone might consider an electric car. Well, what's missing? You know, who cares who knows what Brad wants in an electric car? What matters? Is it the environmental issues, or is it cost saving? Is it convenience? So we've got to take this as a source of content, often a great source of content, information that we might not gain any other way, and then we've got to make sure we put the human touch on it and laser focus on what matters to the customer. Just a couple of examples. Now, Marty Hum is one of our senior proposal quality managers. He works in a proposal center of excellence. He said this to us the other day, and you've heard this paradox before with technology in general, but you might work yourself out of a job only to create new or more rewarding work. You know, how true is that? You know, there may be some of us in this webinar that are pretty concerned, you know, about our responsibilities, our job, and so forth being done away with, and you know, maybe so, you know, maybe so. But you know, to validate Marty's quote, this came from just the other day, from Sunday, from Business Insider, an article. Workers have used OpenAI ChatGPT for dozens of tasks. So this doesn't necessarily have to do with, you know, saving your job or anything, but this has to do with making our work better, more rewarding. It's possibly a way to make us more efficient. So while some fear ChatGPT is already eliminating jobs, it's also introduced new ways to help make us more efficient. One example is putting in there, you know, people who are working with Microsoft Excel and Google Sheets. We asked ChatGPT how it will help alleviate spreadsheet woes. Here's what Chatbot had to say on how it can help make your Excel experience easier. This would be awesome for me. I'm going to leave you hanging. If you want to find out what ChatGPT says as far as making your Excel life easier, go ask it. Go ask it and see what it tells you. Now, as far as losing jobs, creating jobs, who knows? When word processing first came out, we thought the world was coming to an end. You know, the internet and email, we thought the world was coming to an end. We thought streaming movies was going to eliminate the movie industry. So who knows? We don't know. So here's a couple of potential, you know, I just went to ZipRecruiter, I typed in AI and writer, and, you know, tons of things pop up. And so if we're writing professionals, if this is part of our professional job, we need to learn about this. We need to check into it. We need to be tracking it. And then a simple formula we've kind of come up with, and again, this is very basic, but if we take artificial intelligence content, all right, if we take from these language models, we take that content and we apply what Amy talked about in customer focus, we've got really probably pretty dang good writing. All right, we've got the right writing. If we take artificial intelligence without customer focus and without applying the power approach or method that Amy talked about, we're asking for disaster. I will say, you're asking for possibly being thrown out, non-compliant, and unresponsive if you use artificial intelligence as the only source. If we take artificial intelligence and customer focus and we apply the power method, we have a competitive advantage. Though that's the magic, that's the combination, is all sources of great information, past proposals, our content library, our software databases, content databases, but we've got to apply that customer focus and power that we've been talking about today. We've got to pre-write, write, and rewrite. Okay, Mallory, before I just do a very quick summary, any questions jumping out at you?
We do have a lot of questions, so
Okay.
I'll just start with one. So I'll kind of combine two. So Paige, I think I will address this question to you. It's about style guides. What do you recommend putting into a style guide? And then how do you get writers to use them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you're using a company-specific style guide, generally you want to still have an overarching other style guide, like pointing to Chicago or AP. And in your company-specific one, you really only want to include stuff that deviates from that overarching style guide. So not rewriting the whole thing and write, 600 pages on what your style is, but really focusing in on the things that that makes your company style different, that's specific to your company, with your product names and company names, how you, if you talk about clients or customers or things like that, that really make your style your own. And the best way to have writers use it, I would say, is just to get it in front of them. It is tricky to get everyone on the same page, and also, as best you can, to not feel frustrated about it. That's why we have the editing loop, and if it alleviates that from them and kind of goes back to what Amy says, it kind of tells them what's in it for them to have an editor. You can say, well, they're going to actually follow our style guide to make sure that we all sound like one person, can help kind of motivate them to leave time for those edits, so that we can really leave that to the editors to be sure that everyone is following the style guide, that we're consistent throughout the whole proposal.
Great, thank you. Probably time for one more, Mallory.
Yeah, so there is something I would like to address. So this comes back to Kelson's point about, editing during the proposal process. But as a caution, so Kelson, I'll pose this question to you and anyone else who wants to chime in for ideas. How do we make sure that we are not causing rework for our editors? Because I feel like that is the other side. When we have editors who don't get enough time to edit, and then we have editors who are constantly reworking, and that causes a different kind of frustration. So how do we mitigate that when the proposals are not 100% complete?
Agreed. That is the other part of the question and the problem. The best way to mitigate that is to do the planning and organizing up front, as we've discussed, so that before writers are tasked with their assignments, or subject matter experts are tasked with their assignments, there's a plan in place. Things have been pulled together already as to what the outline of their section may be, what some key points are going to be used to be included in that. If they've gone to if we use and leverage these other types of reviews, we discuss them as color teams and Shipley. Sometimes the terminology in industry is changing, so having that a strategy review for your proposal, having those types of documents authorized with the way forward, and knowing kind of the things we're going to be talking about and being pulled into that. If our writers and editors are then aware of that, then that's a different kind of roadmap, a template that they can use going forward, which will help reduce or minimize the amount of rework that may occur at the editing level. Another way is going to be that relationship between the contributors, writers, subject matter experts, and the editors, and also those who may be leading the effort to kind of do some of those interim types of reviews, so that it's keeping the writing on track more. And maybe there's some decision making that happens, so the editors aren't involved every day, churning out different things like that, but are still doing strategic inputs throughout the process, which I think will also and should, if we're planning things properly and working things properly, and that's a collective we, that the later editing that they'll be able to do is really just some cleanup stuff, as opposed to large rewrites or something that needs to change the whole scope of a document or a section. So just a couple things there.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, a huge thank you to Mallory and the panel, Amy, Paige, Kelson, thank you. And thank all of you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us in future webinars, and any way we can help when it comes to trying to win and compete for work. We'd love to be a partner in that. So thank you all for joining. Have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll be in touch. Take care.